how many times have you heard Anthony Albanese and Chris Bowen tell us we're going to be a renewable energy superpower?
To be a renewable energy superpower.
A renewable energy superpower.
A renewable energy powerhouse and a renewable energy superpower.
As a renewable energy superpower. A renewable energy superpower.
I reckon if I had $1 for every time I'd heard that promise, I'd be able to pay my electricity bill. Well, based on developments in Tasmania during the past week, we're on track to being a renewable energy super flop. Joining me to discuss this is the Australian newspaper's environment editor, Graham Lloyd. Great to have you with us, Graham. Graham, Tasmania was meant to be the battery of the nation, but according to reports over the weekend, not only is Tasmania not able to power the nation, it's not able to power itself. Tell me how it is that Tasmanian factories are being told they can't expand their businesses because there's not enough power.
Oh, good evening, James. This is one of those things where it's easier to talk about something than it is to do it. It's probably got a bit ahead of itself in Tasmania, where it's told it's going to be the battery of the nation and the big hydroelectricity resources down there are going to be propping up everything that's happening on the mainland. Now, that part is true. The hydroelectricity assets are, in fact, backing up Victoria. The bit that's missing is the connector that's supposed to spawn a whole load of renewable wind projects and other things that will keep the lights on in Tasmania. So power that used to power the state is now being used elsewhere. There's not enough power in the state, and industry there is being told, well, look, you're going to have to shelve those expansion plans because it's just not going to be possible.
Now, this is a tragedy for Tasmania because I understand Tasmania was pretty much self-sufficient when it came to energy. Then, as you said, they decided they were going to power the nation. Talk to me about this interconnector. This is a 255-kilometre cable that goes between Tasmania and the mainland, which is going to supposedly power Victoria's green energy dreams. Is that correct?
That's correct. There is an existing connector between the mainland and Tasmania, which is being used now to export hydroelectricity. The plan was for something called Marinus Link, which was another high voltage line that would enable more power to be sent in each direction. And this would really underwrite a whole suite of wind and renewable projects in the north of Tasmania, where there's been a lot of concern, particularly from Bob Brown and others, that Tasmania is known as being this great wilderness and a fabulous environment. It's basically going to be smothered in wind turbines to export power elsewhere. Now, what's happened is the Tasmanian government has said, well, look, this is a fantastic plan. Problem is we can't afford to do it. So the whole battery of the nation agenda has fallen in a heap. And I guess there's a fair bit of politics here. And Chris Bowen is going to be asked to put in his hand in his pocket and prop it all up. But in a bigger sense, this is on top of the Snowy Hydro cost blowing out and a whole range of other projects, the transmission lines and other things, all costing more and taking longer. And at some point in time, it's looking like it's going to break.
So that link you talked about, the cost has blown out from, 3.1 billion to 5.5 billion. This is pretty typical with renewable energy plans, isn't it? These massive cost blowouts that then make them unaffordable.
Well, I think it's pretty standard fare for anything that involves government. And what you're seeing is these big construction projects, they're backed by governments, there's a desperation to get them done. And what happens is the price pretty typically goes up by, orders of magnitude.
Now, if that link doesn't go ahead, presumably because the federal government don't stump up the extra $2.5 billion to fund it, where does that leave Victorian government's renewable energy targets? Because aren't they counting on clean energy from Tasmania to help them achieve their very ambitious targets?
Well, certainly Tasmania has for a long period of time had big resources of hydroelectricity, true zero emissions power, and on demand. They are being counted as part of the backup for the mainland and Victoria in particular. So without it, without the battery of the nation, it gets much harder to achieve the sort of things that state governments have been promising.
And the irony in all of this is that Tasmania are actually now relying on gas to meet their power needs. Is that correct?
Well, that's correct. That they're now running gas turbines to make up for the shortfall in local supplies, because what used to be their local supplies are now being consumed elsewhere. So it's a huge own goal on the sort of clean and green stakes.
The Tasmanian Chamber of Commerce are warning that this lack of power now in Tasmania could lead to a recession in that state. Is it just me, or does it feel like we're currently in the middle of a gigantic experiment with Australia's economic well-being and it's kind of falling apart in front of our eyes?
Well, what we're saying in Tasmania, obviously, the shortage of power means an increase in prices for power. Industry is very concerned that their power prices are going to go up and stay up, as they are everywhere, and that's going to lead to very poor outcomes for them in a business sense. In terms of a big experiment, we are in the middle of a big experiment trying to decarbonise one of the most carbon-intensive energy systems in the world, and we've set out on this big adventure with huge ambitions, and obviously there are problems along the way. The sort of call out is being made by people at the very sort of heart of this transition that this is going to take longer, it's going to cost more than was envisaged. So really, what is the plan B?
Graham, it's just incredible to watch what's unfolding. I appreciate your coverage in The Australian, and thanks for talking to me tonight.